Okay, so for week 14 hands-on, we're going to continue this process we've started already, where you are going to now make a decision. You're going to decide. That's the name of the writing, right? So the written instruction is to decide and build. So there was several options I gave last time. One was that the end of the lynda.com lectures, when we end it, because in this week we're in the uh, third week of Bootstrap, and then we'll do a fourth. And at the end, and I showed this last week, this is the site that ends up being at the end after all the changes that he's done to it. So you could absolutely use this as a starting point for Project Zero. I showed, and I had you all go find a template, whether you wanted to use it or not, just to have the experience of doing it. And here was the one that I had. And what I did last week is I went ahead, and I didn't make you do this, but I suggested that you look at the template that you chose and see if you could lay in that menu navigation that we did in week 12, I believe. Okay, but then ultimately what I had you do was move that to a directory, whatever the name for me, I kept the same name, and then I moved it to the server, right? So if I go to my well, I'm not going to go there. You saw me do that, and actually, that was one of the challenges. Is students, I noticed this idea of once you upload to the server, then when you reference the files, you have to reference it from the server domain space name I gave you, which is basically a domain, just very long, but it is still, that's how you have to reference it in order you to find, and that's what I showed you last week, how to do that for that template directory, and that's why I did it, so I could show you how you pull that together, because when you move the files to the server to see the files rendered as web pages, and you have to reference that beginning with your server space, and in that case a directory. So now that and having said all this, so I've shown you, right, the idea of, you could have used this, I'm going to use this. There is another option, and this is the time to decide, right? So like I said, I recommended you start looking at that, considering you may want to use that. The other option is that there are, on the Get Bootstrap getting started, there are some really good examples as well. And I think any of these should be workable if you wanted them. Nav bars, and really that's really what we need, is a nav bar for you to have the different pages and you can navigate through the site. So that is the other option. So it is time for you to make a decision. Now, let me just say, if for some reason as you get close you decide to change, that really is something too, because ultimately I'm going to grade Project Zero on did you meet the did you accomplish all the requirements. But if you make a decision here and you start building, right, and it's going to be easier. I mean, that's just, I'm just being quite real with you, is that if you just make a decision, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to get this done. And here's what happens. You all start looking, and this is normal human behavior. You start looking at some of the other students that may have a little more experience and go, oh my God, I will never make it look like that. That's actually not the goal. The goal is for you to get the experience, and some people who come in with more experience want to be able to take it to the next level, and that's okay too. Okay, but the job is to get through this, right? Project Zero, 25% of your score, you want to get this done. All right, so did I clear that whole? So decide decide whether you're going to use the ending bootstrap training template from Ray, the template I had you look at last week, or some other example on their site, but choose it. So for me, now that I've chosen it, because I don't know if you remember this, but I had it in my downloads directory. Okay, in my downloads directory. And so what I had to do was, because I had done the work in there, is I copied it now into my 82 directory where we'd kind of been working before, right? So I'm going to make it look like here because I like it looking like this better. So that's the clean template that I had done before, and what I did is I copied all my template files into this 82 directory. Now this 82 directory this and not the 82, but everything inside of it is what ultimately I will upload to the server to see my server space, and I'll do that at the end now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, now that I've copied them over here, right, so now that I've copied my files into this location, and I had built them out last week, right, for the structure that I was looking at. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a little more work to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the 82 directory into, and you don't see it here, but I'm going to drop it in to my Sublime. Like I said, that's a great way to do this. So now that I have that dropped into Sublime, now I can play with this, right? Because and again, the more you understand this template, the easier this is going to be. And you spend a little time getting, and this is the idea of spending time getting to know it, is really modifying it. Like I showed last week, doing the basic modifications of adding the menu, right? This is your index file, so this is your first file, the default file for the server, and then I've added my name of my menu, right? And now I've changed these, so this is all the work. This is all the work. I haven't really done anything else that I did last week, right? So I think what I'm going to do now is actually I'm going to go ahead and set up my CyberDuck and go ahead and do an upload, and then come back and talk a little more about some of the stuff you'd want to do. Okay, so I have my CyberDuck up. I've already connected to my server space. And if I double click into my HTTP docs, this is what we generally refer to as the root of my web server. And the reason is anything in this directory, make sure I can get out of here. By the way, I added this week to my keychain because I kept having to re-enter it. I don't know why I didn't see it until today, but no big deal. So the reason we say that is whatever is in the HTTP docs directory is when I go to that web server space, your URL, your space that is pointing to your web server, right? So by the way, if you were doing this for real, right, this would be your domain name, right? I don't know why, for some domain name, right? So it'd be that, right? So, but in our case, because you guys don't have domains, they are still set up as full working backend server spaces. And if you ever, all you'd have to do is add a domain. But I don't want to get too sidetracked here because I want to keep on track, right? So I want you to get this concept because this is, I know, one of the things that threw folks off. I keep hitting that. So now this is what's on my server right now, because this is what we had done where I did the CDN version of the Bootstrap page, right? So this is not needing any other directories. And then what I did on CyberDuck is I uploaded that template, right? So that in order for me to look at the template, then I would just do, and by the way, notice my browser remembers, right? Because that's the name, Bootstrap Clean Blog 103. That is the name of the template that is located in that directory, right? So now what I'm doing is I've made my decision. So now I've made my decision. I've copied my template into the directory that I'm going to be using on my local computer. And now I'm going to push that or place it, FTP it. Let's get my terms right so we don't get it confusing. Let's FTP this to the server. We're going to continue making changes, but it's just good to get this experience of doing it. Okay? So here we go, CyberDuck. And so now what I want to do, let's get me out of there. Come back to this directory. So I have this 82 and I have all of these files, right? Now I don't need to take that one up again, right? Because I've already done it, but I do want to take everything else up. So let me see if I can. I believe, yeah, there we go. So I could actually say I want to take all of that, those directories. I could take all of those, right? If I wanted to, the license. So how are you using your CyberDuck is really about how your comfort level on this is. But what I need to do is I need to take these directories. So let me just, and because I don't want to grab everything, I'm going to take just those directories. There we go. And now I'm going to move them, right? So I'm going to move them up to this location. And so I'm going to hit continue, and it's going to go, oh yeah, we're going to overwrite, and I'm going to say yeah, continue. I'm going to overwrite all those directories that are up there, because this template is going to need to use, right, that CSS directory. It's going to have a new images directory, so it's uploading all the CSS now, right? And now once I do this, right, so now once I do this, and it looks like it's got, well, looks like it's pretty much done actually. Let's see. So what I did here is I uploaded first the folders, and just because I didn't want to upload that one again, I could have done just the directory. And so I could do all these. So now these will just go straight over, right? So now CyberDuck's like talking to me again, squawking, going, yeah, I'm going to continue. And now it's uploading all those, and I'm going to say, yeah, continue. Right? So this is the idea, and it's still working on it. It's like, good, 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 good. Everything's good. Right? So this is the idea of getting the template now up on the root. So how do I know I did it correctly? Right? So how I know I did it correctly, get out of here, is I'm going to go over here to my server space, right? Do you remember what it was before? That's what it looked like before. Now, why isn't it showing? Because I have to do the refresh. So once I do the refresh, if I got everything working, I've uploaded my template into that the server space. So now I have my template that I'm going to be building, Project Zero, uploaded. So now I can continue working on it in here. Okay, and then when I'm ready, I do another upload. So keeping this in mind, this is how you do it, right? If we were using Git, we would be staging and committing and then going to a remote server, but we're using FTP, so all we have to do is make changes and go to the server. So how often do you upload? Well, the more changes you do, the more often you would do it. That way, if you have it out on the server, you know it's working, everything's good. You could do it at the end of, a couple hours of work. It's really dependent on you. So I'm going to pause again. I'm going to make a couple of more changes. Matter of fact, before I do that though, the one thing I want you to also start to understand, and I suspect hopefully some of you have already started this process, but to use this template, right, I would need to understand how it's using the grid. And this is a really important way you understand Bootstrap, is you understand the way the grid is used in this particular example, right? So I can tell on mine, right, is that I have a grid system that is for the header up here. Let me see where I saw that before. So here's my navigation. It's a container fluid, right? So in that case, that's just the navigation at the top. And then we have, here's the menu at the side. So in here is my intro header. So this is got a container with a row, and then I can see it's using the grid system, so at the large. So here's what you have to start asking yourself: how well did you remember what they were talking about in the Bootstrap training about understanding how to read this, right? Because really what this is saying is that at the largest, because Bootstrap is built mobile first, at the largest size, right, and Bootstrap has different what we call media query breakpoints. At the largest, I'm going to use 8 of the 12. Remember, a 12 grid system. I'm going to have an offset for 2 on each side, right? And then here, I'm going to have, at the medium size, I'm going to have 10 of them with an offset of 1. So when I'm in a medium size, I'll have a little less offset. And offset is really like a margin on each side. So what I'm going to do on my pause is I'm going to actually build out now another page. I'm going to put 2 columns. I'm going to change this from 1 column, which it is now, right? So this right now, if we're looking at it, right? So this is the, where's it at? Right, here's the server space, right? So on my local system, I'm going to change it to 2 columns and make some additional changes so you can see this. So that's the idea of you building this out. So I'll pause and do that and come right back. Okay, so that was kind of a fun little detour I took in trying to change that. And actually, that's the point of this work this week. And like I said, I'd started next week, but I suspect most of you, and some of you did it because I saw. So, how did I do it? So, it took me a little bit of time just to kind of study the way this was laid in there. And again, I wanted to move it from one column to two. So, I had to look at the structure of the HTML column divs. Okay, so I had to look at it down in here. I had to look at it and break it because in each row, right? So first you have your container and then you have your row. And then within each row, so this would be, and this tells it how much space it's going to take, right? At a large view, it's going to take, of the 12 columns, it's going to take 4. And then my second, so that'll be my first column, and then on my second column, I want it to take more space, right? So that's the idea of this is column 1 and column 2. And I really want you to just play around with this to kind of see how this would work, right? And I haven't done the content I originally anticipated putting in there, but that's okay too. I spent a little more time, but I think this will be a good exercise for you to get your navigation working. So actually, let me go ahead and do that for the rest of them, right? So now that I have this working, I also updated a few other things to start making it my own, making it my name, right? And I showed you this last week, but let me actually now make this work correctly for what I want. So now on markup, notice that there was a different image. And did I change it? Hosting, web dev, get. Oh, I actually did change that for that one. So if I click back to home, that worked. And if I hit on hosting, oh, it was hosting I hadn't done. So let me go ahead and show that, right? So I want you to play with, right? Seeing if you can modify whatever it is you're doing for 2 columns. Should be easy. Mine was a little more complicated because of my template, and it just took me wrapping my head around the grid system again, which is always good. And so now I'm going to pull up because I was saying, okay, it was my, which one was it? It was hosting? Yeah, hosting doesn't have the right navigation. So I'm going to go to my index. I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to grab this right here, LI, all the way to LI. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go into my hosting. I'm going to find that equivalent. And again, as the more you learn in web development, you'll find different ways to do this. This is kind of, again, the old-fashioned way. I'm going to save it, right? And then when I do that, I'm going to come back out. I'm going to refresh it. And then I'll see that that is then working in there. I can hit back to home. Very cool. Oh, by the way, the other thing I noticed on hosting, I need to make sure this is working, right, to where it says Web Technologies. So I have to find where that content is, and I just decided that that's how I would want to save it. Okay, refresh it. Cool. Okay, so I think web dev also needed to be done, so I can go ahead and select that again. Now it doesn't matter where I get it from, right? I'm going to go to web dev here. I'm going to find, there's the title. I do need to modify that. But for now, I'll just do the navigation. Okay. So last week I built all these pages, right? And so this week I'm just doing the next stage of modifying it to make sure each page then has the correct navigation. Cool. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to make your navigation for the items that you selected, the menu categories that you selected, right? So now that I've done that, in CyberDuck, right? So let's go back here. So now what I want to do is I've made some changes. I'm going to go back. Here's my server. Here it is, right over here. Right? So this is what's on the server, and this is when I uploaded the whole thing. So this is the old version. So now that you've uploaded everything, CyberDuck is pretty easy because all you have to do now is upload the pages that have changed. So I'm going to bring up my directory right here. This is my desktop, my 82. I was looking at this before, and then if I remember, right, I can figure out which pages have changed, right? And I could look at it by, and I can look at it by date actually here to figure out, oh, since then what's changed? Well, I know I changed all those. And I didn't have to change the markup yet, and I haven't changed these, so what I can do is just drag these over, upload them, say continue, web dev, I'm going to overwrite all of them. Cool. So now that I've done that, I can go back to my site and I should see then the changes that I did right on my website. I see my 2 columns that I changed. My markup has the navigation. My hosting has the right navigation. My web dev has a navigation. And oh, look, my Git still had that old one. So I'm like, okay, that's one I didn't do, right? So I think you get the idea, right? So the idea is I want you to build it. I want you to build, and what I didn't do and I anticipated doing in this round, but and the reason, again, I didn't was because my template required me to do a little more work to kind of get my columns figured out. So I'll lay in some content probably by the time you look at this as well so you can get an idea. But I really just want you to build this, put it up on your server, and get that process working, right? So and here's the other thing, let's look at the actual work for this one. So this is what we've been doing. Upload it to your server place, replacing the root content, right? This is the idea of decide and build. And then write 150 words describing your template. Make sure to include the grid it is using, right? And do the normal replies. So this is where, the simpler the template that you use, the easier this part is. So you're getting to select, right? If you use the one that was in at the end of lynda.com, it's an easier one to do. If you choose one of the ones from the example on the Bootstrap site, those are easy to use. Some of these other templates a little more involved, but a little more fun to do as well. So in this, I'm going to go ahead and do a different video for the hands-on, or for the current topics, because I want to show you then how to build another page, because again, the more exercise you get here, the more this will become normal to you. So thanks for hanging there with me. This was kind of fun, and it was a little more time than I realized because I had to modify my template, but it's all good because I got to relook at the grid system again, which again, if you don't do Bootstrap every day, or the more you do it, the get used to it, it's really muscle memory to remember how that grid system works. So I'll talk to you later.